how do we look for our Dharma? I'm not sure if you can actually search for it. You certainly can't search externally. That's for sure. The most that you can do with regard to an external search is recognizing and identifying that which you're doing not because it's your Dharma. So for example, we've got so many cues coming to us from our society, from the culture that tell us how we should be, what we should do, what our values should be, what our priorities should be. And a lot of them we adopt as our own because that's what society tells us is acceptable. If you can recognize inside yourself that the urge, the yearning, the longing for material wealth, for a certain lifestyle, for a vacation home in a certain spot, for a certain type of body, for all of these sorts of things. If you're able to look at all of those and understand that they've come to you from the outside, that you didn't come on this earth with a yearning for money. You didn't come on this earth with a yearning for, lots of material possessions. That's been inculcated in you. You didn't come on this earth yearning for a body of a certain shape or a certain color or a certain size. Again, it's something that we've taken in. We've been brainwashed in a way, indoctrinated. If you can start at least peeling those back, then you'll understand at least what your Dharma is not. Because a lot of times we get confused. My Dharma is to be the president of this or the head of that. Well, why? Because I'm supposed to be leading, and really that's your Dharma or that's your ego? And this is where at least we can figure out what our Dharma is not. Because if we can name and identify where we've picked up certain beliefs, this came from the billboard outside my school. The whole time I was in school, every day I drove by school and saw this billboard. Taking it in from there. I took this in from my favorite TV serial when I was a kid because the lead actress on that, she did this, she looked like that, she acted like that. So I grew up believing that was the way to be. And slowly, at least you can remove what your Dharma is not. And that brings you a little bit of stillness inside, a little bit of quiet inside, into which an experience of you blossoms. Now, a lot of us, Dharma is not necessarily one thing. And this is where we really also end up getting almost traumatized, spiritually traumatized by this search for my one Dharma. Is it to be a doctor? Is it to be an engineer? Is it to be a teacher? Is it to be... And yes, some people, there absolutely are some people who come into this world with, teacher stamped on them, and you just, from early childhood and their whole lives, they just breathe all I want to do is teach. But for most of us, it's not like that. And this is where it's important to understand also that Dharma isn't the same as a career or a profession or a life path or calling in that way. The word Dharma, the root of the word Dharma is literally that which protects, that which sustains, that which upholds. So our Dharma is that which upholds us, that which sustains us, that which protects us. It's not my job. It's not my career. It's much more who I am. And so if we stop trying to find the right box that our Dharma fits in, I think we'd be a lot happier and a lot more able to live that Dharma. And so, for example, in the story that I was giving about the saint and the scorpion, okay, so the saint's Dharma was to save. It's what our gurus are here for. To save the rest of us. Human being, devoted disciple, or scorpion drowning in the water. Either way. If you look within yourself, what you'll find, there are certain things you do, certain ways you are in the world that feel very deeply in alignment with who you are, not your ego. And this is really tricky. Really tricky. Because the ego loves to be loved. The ego loves to be praised. The ego loves to be put on pedestals. So, and the ego is very versatile. So it can masquerade as any part of us. When you say, oh, I want to check in with my intuition. The ego is able to, throw on intuition mask and say, voila, intuition, here I am. You called? You say, I want to check in with that, my inner voice, that still voice within me. Ego throws on mask of still inner voice and says, yes, you called. So it's really subtle. And this is where meditation is really so important. It's also where a guru is really helpful, because a guru really shows us the light of who we are. And as you are in those ways of being, what you experience is there's a sense, and again, you've got to tease the ego out of it. So it's not, here's how I feel when people are touching my feet, or here's how I feel when people tell me, oh, you're so wonderful, or here's how I feel when people say, oh, you're so great, oh, you helped me so much, or, whatever it is. Not that. But here's what I do, that even if people said to me that was useless, nonetheless, it felt really right doing it. Like the saint and the scorpion. Again, perfect example. Felt right to the saint to do it. Scorpion was obviously unappreciative, kept stinging him. But the saint kept doing it because the act of doing it was so in alignment with who he knew himself to be. And there are certain ways that you'll find of yourself. And again, it's not something as specific as doctor, lawyer, engineer. It's much more a way of being in the world that feels so right to you that regardless of whether anyone notices, let alone appreciates and rewards it, you want to keep doing it. So if you were an artist, if your Dharma were to paint, let's say, wouldn't matter if you ever sold a painting. You'd be fine pumping gas, waiting tables, filing papers to be able to put food on your table so you could have time to paint. Because the painting in and of itself would feel so right to you. So in alignment with the very core nature of who you are. For me, being in service felt so right to me from the beginning. It defied logic. One day I was in the middle of a PhD program, at a prestigious place, getting a prestigious degree, doing prestigious things, and that I was already bored by. A couple months later, I'm here typing, mundane correspondence on an old manual typewriter. Like forget computer, forget electrical typewriter. One of those old things that you only see in the movies these days with the keys that literally pop up and down that you have to push down like that. And the first seva that I ever did here was just write letters to different people about different things, little things, small things, on this manual typewriter. But it was exhilarating. And I remember laughing at myself. I've always been very self-introspective, and I remember laughing at myself and thinking, this is so funny. You were bored by research papers on, intricacies of neurology and psychology and how it worked with kids. And I was already bored with something that actually fascinated me, but just the way that it was moving. I felt like it was too slow. And now here I was exhilarated by typing letters to people I'd never met, who lived in places I'd never heard of, that someone couldn't attend their, wedding, but sent, love and blessings, that my guru wasn't going to be able to be there, and so sent his loves and blessings. But it was exhilarating. Why? Because even though I couldn't articulate it at the time, and I had no idea that this was what I had found, it was so obvious to me that my dharma was to serve. Being in service felt so right that regardless of what form it took, regardless of what form the service took, simply doing it was so right. And again, it was decades before I would have even termed it that. But this is a beginning of how you start to know about Dharma, is the way of being feels right. As you are in that space, in that movement, doing what you're doing, not the act, not the specific action, not how it's going to impact somebody, but just you in that movement, in that moment, feels right. And so that's how you start to begin to know. But again, as I said, it took me decades. I never would have articulated it like that at that time. I would have just been, to me, it was literally exhilarating. It was so exciting. And so as you move through the world, don't worry about naming your Dharma. Don't worry about having a box for it, a category for it. But just stay connected to yourself. Stay connected within. How can you see as you're moving? As you're moving through the world, what you're doing because it's what a TV commercial told you to do, or what, a billboard told you to do that society says, what your ego wants you to do. This is too mundane. I was supposed to be, a famous neurological researcher and this and that, It's ego. Ego's not bad. It's important to name what it is. But it doesn't take us to a place of deep peace. Because the thing with the ego is, in Buddhism, they refer to it as a hungry ghost. Because the ego is never full. And so when we mistake our ego for our Dharma, we set ourselves up on a lifetime of feeding this hungry ghost. It's never enough. It's never enough praise. It's never enough reward. It's never enough promotions. It's never enough accolades. It's never enough of whatever it is we think we're getting from what we're doing. It's never enough if it's feeding my ego. Which is why it's so much more important to sink down deeper than the ego into that which can flow through us. And when I say service, by the way, when I've realized that that's, that my Dharma is to serve, it's not always service with my hands. I mean, it's not always a specific type of service. It's been a long time since I've been on the manual typewriter. But what it is allowing whatever needs to happen in that moment to flow through me. And when I do that, I feel most in line with my truest self. And so that's how I know. And so see, as you check in with yourself, as you move through the world, don't kill yourself sitting on a couch trying to figure out what your Dharma is, but just as you move through the world, check in with yourself about what you're doing that's ego and what you're doing because it resonates within you.